Are we just puppets of our DNA? You didn't choose your face. You didn't choose your fears. You didn't choose what makes you angry, what makes you fall in love, or what keeps you awake at 3 in the morning staring at a ceiling that offers no answers. You didn't even choose to be born. And yet you walk through your life every single day believing that you are the one making the decisions. But what if that belief is the biggest lie your biology ever told you? In 1962, a scientist named Francis Crick stood in front of a crowded lecture hall and said something that should have shattered everything. He called it the central dogma of molecular biology. The idea was simple on the surface. DNA makes RNA. RNA makes protein. Protein makes you. Your thoughts. Your hungers. Your loves. Your violence. Your kindness. All of it manufactured. Assembled. Instructed. Most people heard that and shrugged. It was science. Abstract. Cold. It lived in textbooks and laboratories and had nothing to do with the warm, complicated, feeling creature you believed yourself to be. But here's what they didn't tell you in school. If your brain is built by your DNA, and your brain produces your thoughts, then who is actually doing the thinking? Is it you? Or is it something older? Something that was running long before you had a name? Let's go back to the very beginning of you. 23 chromosomes from your mother. 23 from your father. A collision of two genetic histories stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Before your parents. Before their parents. All the way back to creatures that crawled out of shallow water onto uncertain ground. And in the moment those chromosomes merged, before you had a single thought, before you had a heartbeat, before you had a name, the instructions were already being written. The shape of your nose. The baseline level of serotonin in your brain. Your statistical likelihood of developing depression. Your predisposition to risk-taking behavior. Your immune system's weak points. All of it. Decided. Without your input. But here's where it gets disturbing. It's not just the physical things. In 2013, researchers at Emory University conducted a study that quietly terrified the scientific community. They took mice. They exposed them to the smell of cherry blossoms and simultaneously gave them an electric shock. Pain and cherry blossoms, over and over, until the mice associated that scent with terror. Then those mice had children. Those children had never smelled cherry blossoms. They had never been shocked. They had never experienced a single moment of that trauma. But when the scent reached them, they flinched. Their bodies knew. And then those children had children. A third generation. Still flinching. Still carrying the ghost of a pain they never personally experienced. The trauma had been written into the DNA itself. And this is where everything changed. Because this wasn't just about mice. The same patterns have been found in humans. The grandchildren of Holocaust survivors showing measurable biological differences in their stress hormones. The descendants of famine survivors with altered metabolic genes that still prepare the body for starvation in a world where food is everywhere. Your DNA is not just a blueprint. It's a memory. A long, dark, accumulated memory of every threat your ancestors ever survived. Every famine. Every predator. Every war. Every heartbreak that almost killed the bloodline. And it is speaking to you. Right now. Through your anxiety. Through your instincts. Through the inexplicable fears you can never quite explain. But that's not the worst part. In 2016, behavioral geneticists published something the mainstream press barely covered. After decades of twin studies, identical twins raised apart, in completely different environments, different countries, different cultures, the numbers came back with an almost uncomfortable consistency. Personality traits are approximately 40 to 60% heritable. Your tendency toward introversion or extroversion largely genetic. Your baseline happiness level largely genetic. Your political leanings, your religiosity, your capacity for empathy, your likelihood of divorce. All of it carrying a significant genetic fingerprint. And here is the part that nobody wants to sit with. If your personality was substantially pre-written before you took your first breath, then every major decision of your life, who you loved, what career you chose, whether you stayed or left, whether you were cruel or kind in your worst moments, how much of that was actually yours? How much of what you call your story was already their story? The ancestors. The dead. The long chain of survival and suffering that built the body you're living in right now. But here's the thing almost nobody in this conversation ever says. Awareness. The moment you know you are a puppet, something changes. Because puppets don't wonder if they're puppets. Puppets don't lie awake at night asking whether their grief is real or just a chemical instruction. Puppets don't write poetry about meaninglessness. Puppets don't choose to behave differently than their instincts demand, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, in those rare, difficult, luminous moments. And the neuroscience here is just as strange as the genetics. When you consciously observe your own thought, when you notice an impulse and choose not to follow it, the activity in your prefrontal cortex changes. You are, in some measurable, physical, real way, using your brain to redirect your brain. The instrument is examining itself. And changing itself in the process. This is not science fiction. This is not philosophy dressed up as fact. This is what the imaging studies show. You are partially written by your DNA. That much is undeniable. But you are also the only creature on this planet that can read what's been written and sometimes, just sometimes, edit the next line. So the real question was never whether DNA controls us. The real question is what we do with the knowledge that it does. Because here's what this entire story was actually about. It was never really about genetics. It was about authorship. Who gets to write your life? Is it the ancient code running silently in every cell? Is it the trauma your grandmother carried and passed on without knowing? Is it the evolutionary instincts that whisper fear this, want that, destroy him, protect her without ever explaining why? Or is there something else? Something that emerges from the biology but isn't only the biology. Consciousness looking at itself in a mirror. Asking impossible questions. Refusing easy answers. The most unsettling possibility isn't that we're puppets of our DNA. The most unsettling possibility is that we are almost puppets, and that small, terrifying space between the instruction and the action, that razor-thin gap where awareness lives, that might be the only freedom we've ever had. And most people never even know it exists. They live their whole lives being exactly who their genes predicted they would be, in exactly the relationships their attachment patterns predicted they would choose, making exactly the mistakes their inherited fears made inevitable. Never once stopping. Never once looking down at the strings. You are ancient. Every fear you feel has been felt by 1,000 versions of you across 10,000 years. Every longing, every rage, every inexplicable sadness, it echoes backward through time into the bodies of people who never knew your name but gave you everything you are. You are a letter written by the dead, delivered into a future they could not imagine. And maybe that's not a prison. Maybe that's a responsibility. Because you are also somehow, impossibly, the first version of you that knows. The first one reading the letter. The first one who can write back. The question isn't whether your DNA shaped you. It did. It does. It will. The question is what you shape now that you know. Total estimated runtime approximately 811 minutes at natural documentary pace. Word count 1,480 words.